Hello and welcome to another episode of the Homebrew Pub, the only pub in existence where every beer on tap is made by a homebrewer. And on this ethereal plane, the Homebrew Pub will turn into the guest brewer's perfect brew pub. So please come in, grab a stool, and grab a pint. This week we welcome to the Brew Pub a homebrewing legend. Even though he might disagree with that, we're going to disagree with him. It is Denny Conn. Hello, Denny.
Hey. Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for asking me to chat. I really enjoy talking to you.
Absolutely. How have you been?
Very well. I haven't been brewing as much as I would like to, but I hope in the next couple days to get back on track again. I've got some experimental beers I need to brew for a seminar we'll hopefully be doing at HomebrewCon this summer. Mm-hmm. So I got to jump on that and start doing that.
And for anyone listening who doesn't know, Denny is one of the hosts of Experimental Brewing, which is one of the best homebrew podcasts out there. And
Thank
you have how many episodes?
Let me see here. We're working on 146 of experimental brewing, and I think we have like 120 or so of the brew files.
Oh, wow. I know I dig into your back catalog quite a lot.
Well, there's plenty of it there. I can hardly stand to go back and listen to some of those early ones because we're so much better now.
It's all about learning. I mean, you get better the more you do something.
That's very true, man. That's very true.
And, I mean, that's the ultimate lesson I would say for myself is with homebrewing. Your first batch you ever brewed, in my opinion, is going to be the best thing you've ever drunk. And then once you've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, you look back upon it and be like, what was I thinking? So
right. Well, and, people always ask me, about tips to become a better homebrewer. And for me, the number one tip is just brew.
Yeah.
Right? The more you do it, the better you'll get. Keep careful notes because if you make a mistake, you want to be sure you never do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do something right, you want to make sure that you can do that again.
Yeah.
So, go out there, brew, make mistakes, learn from them.
The mistakes is where the fun happens.
The fun and the panic.
Well, because one of my favorite brewing stories of all time comes from Stone Brewing, and it was when they moved into the bigger brew house, and they were brewing their pale, and they tasted it, and the head brewer freaked out that it was wrong, and he was visiting his calculations again. And I want to say it was Greg Cook was like, just drink it and tell me what you think. And that was the beer that became Arrogant Bastard. They just took the notes on what they did.
Really?
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite homebrewing or favorite brewing stories.
I've never heard that story before. That's great, man. I love that beer too.
And that's why it became Arrogant Bastard, because they were arrogant enough to release it.
Well, yeah, that works, man.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, welcome to the Homebrew Pub, the only pub in the universe where every beer on tap is brewed by a homebrewer. And
except for my pub.
Except for your pub. And it's, guest homebrewers. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And our tap list is ever growing, which is really exciting. So, when you, because you've brewed 500 plus batches now?
587 I'm up to.
Oh, wow. So soon your bio is going to say 600.
I hope so.
So when you're approaching brewing a beer, approaching the recipe, what's your thought process? Because you do some crazy beers as well. I mean, you've got the book Experimental Brewing, which is a great read. How do you formulate the beer you're gonna make?
Well, first of all, just let me say that book, there are two sides of experimental, and it's the crazy beer recipes mainly come from Drew. Mm-hmm. And for me, the experimental side was, testing things to see how they're working and stuff like that, more of the quote science side. Mm-hmm. But what I do when I'm starting to get an idea for a beer, I try and taste it in my head. Mm-hmm. So that I have a real clear idea of what I'm shooting for. it's not like the ground up approach where you just take a bunch of ingredients and put them together and see what you get. I imagine what the final beer will be, and then I try to envision how to get there.
Hmm.
You know, for instance, that's the way my bourbon vanilla porter recipe worked.
Mm.
You know, I had an idea of what I wanted the beer to taste like, so then I started at the bottom and kind of like worked my way up to how to get there.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm also not very good at hitting things the first time, so I brew a lot of test batches. My rye IPA was one of those. I think that I brewed 13 test batches.
Oh my God.
Uh, well, I was my wife loves IPAs. You
Yeah.
know, if it doesn't have 70 IBUs, she's not interested in the beer. Um, so I was trying to come up with a beer for her yearly birthday party. So I kept rebrewing that beer until she said, "Nope, that's it." And that recipe has never changed a bit since
Yeah.
then. You know, so envisioning what you're trying to go for, and then brewing test batches and changing things in those test batches until you get to what's in your head is kind of my normal process when I mean, there's also the stuff. It's like I've made so many IPAs that I just go, okay, I want a West Coast IPA. This is the grist that I use. I put hops in here, here, and here, and I go and look in my hop freezer and see what hops it looks like are going to go together.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of thing, but for a real serious beer, it does begin with tasting it in my head.
Hmm. Do you ever try a commercial beer or take a commercial beer as like that inspiration and try and break it down, or do you try and ignore what the commercial guys are doing and really just, as you say, taste it in your head 100%?
It's not necessarily one or the other. It depends on what the commercial beer is and what my goals are.
Hmm.
I mean, for instance, West Mall Triple, one of my absolute favorite beers in the world. When I was in Belgium, it was hard for me to drink anything else in spite of the plethora of beers that they had, because there was fresh West Mall Triple there all the time, and I just
Hmm.
loved it. So when I brew my own version of that, I go dig out my copy of Brew Like a Monk, and Stan tells you what's in it and how to brew that beer,
Hmm.
and that's the way I do it. Uh, same thing with like a German Pilsner. If I want to make something like a Bitburger, I take a look at like what's in Bitburger and do that.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I don't necessarily like go to a brew pub and say, uh, you know, the stout is really good. I want to brew this at home.
Yeah.
Uh, the closest I might do is try and figure out what's in it and maybe use a bit of that in my next brew.
Hmm.
But you know, I guess I don't really have a set process for doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do look at commercial beers and am influenced by them, and sometimes it's just like, okay, I just want a beer that tastes like this.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the most inspirational speeches I've ever heard about brewing came at HomebrewCon when it was in Denver a number of years ago. And Peter Buchert, forgive me if I mispronounced his name, who was New Belgium at the time, was talking about his theory of formulating a beer recipe and stuff like that. And he was showing these slides, and there was one that with this blue metal staircase going up the outside of a building,
Hmm.
and he said, "I want a beer that reminds me of this shade of blue." Right, but not. I mean, he wasn't talking about a blue beer, right?
Yeah.
He held up a glass and said, "I want a beer that fits in this glass perfectly."
Yeah.
Right, and it's that kind of abstract thinking, as opposed to, oh yeah, I want a beer with like these chocolate notes and
Hmm.
these tropical hops and stuff like that. That was really inspirational to me. So I try to return to that when I'm looking for inspirations for a beer.
Yeah.
I want I want a beer with kind of undefinable characteristics. How's that?
No, I mean, I love it because it's so much of taste and smell is an emotional experience.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
I remember the first time I came to the United States as a kid. We went to Florida, and I can still smell that grass
Oh, cool.
when we got out of the airport. And so now when we go to Florida, I smell that, and because I think it's crabgrass, I think. But I smell that, and it takes me back to being like 9 years old the first time I came to the United States. And I think, I mean, putting into context of beer, like I've brewed beers in honor of special occasions, or we've gone on vacation somewhere and had a beer, and it's like, all right, I am totally stealing this idea. It won't be the same beer, but at least
Right.
this pineapple mango flavor is going to remind me of that one trip.
Yeah. Well, and that was like the kind of like how I came up with the Ballantine-ish also, right?
Hmm.
I knew that I was not going to be able to clone that beer to come up with something that tastes like it.
Hmm.
For one reason, because I've never had it. I don't know what the target is that I'm shooting for. So I just took ingredients that they probably used and put together something in the spirit of that beer,
Yeah.
right?
And the Ballantine-ish, if you go to, everyone listening is going to be like, wow, he's just plugging pop culture brews. If you go to,
You should. You should. More people need to know about it.
thank you. If you go to our Screwball comedy episode with Denny, the Ballantine-ish ale was this fantastic beer, and I cloned it myself. Like I took your recipe and made it myself, and I'm drinking it right now, and I just love that beer. It was so delicious.
Man, I'm really happy. That was one of those that was a total shot in the dark, and I was happy that it came out well. I have about the last quarter of a keg on tap
Oh
now.
wow. So with the Ballantine-ish ale, that being the first time that you brewed it, do you consider that a test batch, or are you that's the beer?
I'm I'm happy with it. If I ever brew it again, I'll brew it exactly like that. Um, as you mentioned, one of the hops, the cluster fugget, is really hard to find.
Hmm.
So, I may not brew it until I can find that again.
Yeah. I so Cluster Fugget is it's a crossbreed of three hops, which is Cluster, Fuggle, and Nugget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a blend. It's not really a
Oh,
crossbreed.
okay.
They take all three of those hops and they blend them together into one mix.
Okay.
Yakima Chief does a lot of that. They have their pink boots blend. They have their veterans blend. They have the Falconer's Flight blend.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, they what they do is they rub different hops and try and figure out what's going to go together.
Hmm.
For their veterans blend, they bring in veterans every year and who are brewers, and these guys sit there and do that. Pink Pink Boots blend. Boy, that's a tongue twister. I guess. But they bring in members of the Pink Boots Society, and they rub hops and go, okay, this much of this one with this much of this one,
Hmm.
and they come up with some really interesting stuff like that.
Yeah. So with Cluster Fugget, because when I made my version, I just assumed because it took 2 ounces in dry.
Hmm.
I just took the idea that it would be 2/3 of an ounce of cluster, like equal measurements of each
Might
one.
be,
Yeah.
might be. You
So,
know, yeah, I really don't know the proportions of their blend. They were they were handing it out at HomebrewCon a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. They
mhm.
had come up with the blend, and you have to love the name, of course.
It's a great name. When you first said it, I was like, "Can we have that on this show?"
Yeah, right. I think that was the kind of reaction they were going for. Uh, but yeah, and I don't know what the blend is, and I hope that they make some more sometime because I really enjoy that blend a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So when you're brewing your different beers, do you? Because I know you are using an electric system.
I am these days. Yes.
Do you change up your process depending on the style of beer, or do you take what you have found works for you and run with that.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. Every once in a while, I'll do insane things like a step mash or something like that,
Hmm.
because with these electric all-in-ones, that is so easy to do.
Yeah.
Uh, I have yet to convince myself I'm getting any real benefits from that for the kinds of beer that I brew and the malts that I brew.
Hmm.
So that every once in a while, you know, I'll do it again just to see if I've changed my mind about things.
Yeah.
Uh, if it was more difficult, I wouldn't do it, but because I'm functionally lazy. Uh,
I'm the same way.
you know, since the day that I started brewing, everything I do has been driven by being lazy.
Yeah.
Right? My motto is the best beer possible with the least effort possible while having the most fun possible.
Yeah.
And the least effort possible part is really important. I don't want to cut corners and leave out anything that will, have a negative impact on the beer that I'm brewing. On the other hand, I don't want to waste time doing stuff that doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Uh, that's what was really driving a lot of my early homebrew experimentation. Uh, what do I really need to do? What can I just say, screw that? We're going to save ourselves 20 minutes and some time here. That way I get done brewing 20 minutes earlier and I can go have a beer.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people who doesn't drink while I'm brewing. So
Yeah.
I tend to start early and try and get finished by like 1 or 2 and then start drinking.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that was a hard lesson for me to learn because when I was younger, a brew day meant a drink day. And I will be honest, there are beers I don't remember finishing and how they turned out drinkable. I will never know.
Yeah, yeah.
But one thing I learned was that if you limit yourself to two, if you do want beers while you brew, which I generally enjoy that, you're gonna have a much better brew day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it comes down to the laziness thing again, though. If I have a couple beers while I'm brewing,
Hmm.
I don't want to like do any of the work at the end of the brew day, any of the cleanup or anything.
Yeah.
It's just like screw that. I'm tired. I've been drinking. I just don't feel like cleaning up, and I'm so OCD that I can't get by with not cleaning up at the end of the brew day.
Yeah.
So, I'm so OCD that I'm actually CDO because the letters are in the right order that way.
I gotta say, so I mean, so as you know, I just went to electric because you gave me that
Yeah.
great advice on getting the Grainfather S40. Um, One of the things I love about it, because when heating up your strike water, before when I was on my propane, I'd be up every minute checking the temperature as if like a big difference had happened. And now I can just set it, leave the lid on, go inside, have a cup of coffee, and then
Yep.
come out 20 minutes later and the water is where I need it to be.
Isn't that wonderful, man?
Yeah.
The, the electric, I mean, the electric all-in-ones are great, and I have to admit that I spent a lot of years with a cooler and
Hmm.
a propane burner and a converted keg kettle and all that stuff, and I loved it, and I made a lot of great beer. But the first time I tried an electric all-in-one, it's like, well, crap, this is so much easier, and it didn't negatively affect the beer quality
Mm-mm.
that I was getting. So why wouldn't you want to make your brew day easier and more fun?
Yeah. Although I do love you say that you're no longer messing around with a cooler, but your Zoom background right now are four coolers drying
Yeah,
in the
right.
autumn sun.
Well, that's from teacher friend to homebrew day many years ago when I had a bunch of members of my club out,
Yeah.
and we were all using the same system.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, that's that's what it is. I mean, I still have that cooler
Hmm.
sitting out in the garage on top of a whole bunch of other equipment that I never use anymore.
See, my friend was like, "Oh, you're gonna sell your propane stuff," and I went, "No, because now I can brew two beers in a day without breaking a sweat." So,
Yeah, well, and the other thing I discovered about propane stuff is if you live in an area that can be plagued by storms and you lose your power,
yeah.
it's very handy having that stuff around.
um, one question I do have you for electric brewing is, did you go? So a lot of the electric brewing systems come in with a a metal basket that you can put your grain in, lift out, let drain in.
Hmm.
Are you still doing a batch sparge method with it, or have you gone to a more brew in the bag style?
No, I'm still basically doing a batch sparge.
Okay.
I know that with the Grainfather stuff, there's a lot of people doing no sparge, and when I first realized that was happening, I kind of went, "Well, you idiot, you could be doing that," but but I haven't yet. I'm still doing a sparge because it's quick and easy. While the brew is going on, I have a 5 gallon pot on an induction plate, and I heat up sparge water in there,
Hmm.
and then I pour in as much as I can get at a time. So
Yeah.
it's not exactly batch sparging, and it's not exactly fly sparging. I guess it would kind of be like flatch sparging, or bly, something, you know. But I do basically stick with some variation of batch sparging just
Hmm.
because it's faster and easier.
Fair enough. I've tried, so I brewed on it twice, and I've tried to do kind of a brew in a bag style both times.
Hmm.
And when I made the Ballantinish ale, I'm not the world's smartest guy. And I didn't think about, well, this is an 18 pound of grain beer recipe.
Oh yeah.
And I had a friend round who wanted to learn how to brew, so I'm doing the old show off thing, like, oh yeah, you do this, and then like seeing me lift this thing out, he's like, dude, you need help. I'm like, no, pride.
Oh, I went I went to a G70 before I did the G40.
Yeah.
And that thing, you can do 15-gallon batches in there. And I've had like, oh geez, when I like do a lot of 12-gallon batches of IPAs so that I can keep my wife supplied, while I go on and brew other stuff. But that ends up with being like, say, 33 pounds of grain,
Yeah.
that I'm using. Uh, 8 pounds of grain absorbs a gallon of water, so that's 4 gallons of water absorbed. Water weighs eight
8
pounds a
pounds a gallon.
gallon, so that's like 64 pounds that I have in that grain basket in the G70.
Yeah.
So before I started using that sucker, I put up a hoist, an electric winch,
Yeah.
hanging above it to lift that. So I make use of that even for the G40 and smaller batches because you know
Smart.
I'm well, it's taken me 70 years to get smart enough to do that.
So for our ever-growing tap list, what is the beer you're going to be adding to the tap list of the homebrew pub?
Picking one is like trying to pick your favorite child or
But you
favorite
keep
pet.
so many notes.
Well, I know, but I mean, it really depends on what kind of mood I'm in.
Hmm.
You know, of course, the rye IPA is right up there at or towards the top of the list.
Hmm.
But it, I would I would also, if it was going to be my homebrew pub that I was running,
Hmm.
I'd also have to have a German Pilsner. I'd have to have a Belgian triple. Uh, I have now started. I mean, it's like when I started brewing, I brewed nothing but dark beers, and then I burned out on those. And in the last 20 years, I've hardly brewed any at all. And suddenly, I'm getting back into porters again.
Nice.
So I would probably put my Nick Danger porter recipe on tap. Um, you know, the wee shroomy, the wee heavy with chanterelle mushrooms,
Hmm.
is an astoundingly good beer. One that you really can't make unless you can go forage the chanterelles yourself, because otherwise there would be about $250 worth of mushrooms in the beer.
Oh my god.
It's really good. Uh, you know, so it's like I was saying, my favorite beer is very much situational.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting out on my deck on a 90-degree day, I'm going to want a German Pils.
Hmm.
Uh, if it's like right now in the winter and it's 40 degrees and pouring rain, then that's a good day to sip a porter and just stare at the rain.
Yeah. And it's called the Nick Danger Porter.
Nick Danger, yeah. This is one that I went through a lot of test batches on because it's when Carafa malt had just started becoming popular and people had just started doing like Vorloff editions of dark malts and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So I went all out on trying to make it smoother, smooth out those dark grains and everything. And I eventually got it so smooth it was insipid.
Yeah.
There was no character to it whatsoever.
Hmm.
So I kind of went back the other way, even added just a touch of black patent malt to it to give it just a little bit of bite. And I utilized something I had learned from the rye IPA. That uses a combination of Columbus and Mount Hood hops. In effect, doing something German, which is the Mount Hood background,
Hmm.
along with something very American. And when I first gave that beer to John Meyer, who was the brewer at Rogue for many many years, he was like going, "Geez, I never would have thought of this. How did you come up with it?" And I was like, "Dumb luck." So, but when I got to the porter, I thought, okay, I really like the way that German and American hops can play together. So that porter uses Tettnanger and Cascade, and I don't think I've ever seen another beer with that combination of hops.
Yeah.
And it works really well because it gives the malt is smooth, but just a bit of back of your palate bite
Hmm.
from the black patent,
Yep.
and then you get the fruitiness, the grapefruity from the Cascade. So it's fruity, but with a bit of bitter to it. And the Tettnanger has that wonderful herbal, flowery character to it, and it just all comes together, in a kind of like a combination of stuff you never would have thought of would
Yeah.
work together.
And why the name Nick Danger?
It was named after one of my cats who just recently left us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nick Danger, yeah. And Nick Danger comes from, if you're as old as me, there's this comedy group around back in the 60s called Fire Sign Theater that was hysterically funny and
Hmm.
made tons of drug references. So we named the cat Nick Danger, and I have a tendency to name beer recipes after my pets.
Awesome.
So yeah. I
One
had
one.
one cat named Fuzzy, and I just couldn't see naming a beer Fuzzy.
I bet if you did a New England IPA,
That ain't never gonna happen.
we have found the one experiment.
Oh man, I have never found one of those that I cared for at all.
Really?
And I'm not so close-minded that I don't try them every once in a while just to see if I'll change my mind. But I that's just one of those styles that I'm not into whatsoever.
Is it the how kind of like fruity the hops are, or what is it about them?
It's the astringency from the massive late hop additions.
Yeah.
Uh, I can feel the grittiness in my mouth. Uh, After I have one, I feel like I need another beer to just wash all that out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Um, I had a good friend who sent me 10 or 12 of the best New England IPAs, and there wasn't one of them that I actually cared for.
Really.
Yeah, and again, it really comes down to that gritty mouth feel,
Hmm.
and the low bitterness also. It's kind of like you drinking orange juice with some sort of like powder in it or something.
I feel like some of them taste like orange juice after you've cleaned your teeth, and I'm saying this is someone who likes New England IPAs,
Yeah,
but I do agree what you're talking about with like that grittiness and that orange juice flavor.
yeah. Well, and not to mention the fact that they're ugly as hell, but I'll put that aside. I can get over that if the beer was actually taste it was to my taste. I
Yeah.
shouldn't say if it was actually tasty because obviously a lot of people like them, but I'm not one of those people.
They do look like that you forgot to put the well flock in.
Yeah, I mean, or worse. I see people posting pictures on Facebook of them, and they go, "Isn't this beautiful?" I'm going, "God, no, it's not." But I don't tell them that because they're proud of the beer they made.
So, on the flip side, then, what is one beer that I mean, you do a lot of test batches, so you might have revisited it. But what is the beer that you would not want to make again? And if it's a New England IPA, I'm gonna love that answer.
Well, no, because I would have had to made one to start with in order to make it again.
Yeah.
So, um, I remember many years. This is really weird. I remember many years ago, I had a dream, and in the dream, I was in the Old West, walking down a boardwalk outside a saloon, and they had a sign up. I can't remember the exact name that I saw on the sign, but it was like, Nugget something or other.
Hmm.
And so I took this dream to be a sign, and I planted nugget hops. I went out and I bought a bunch. I made a beer that was all nugget, and it was like freaking disgusting. I think it was a porter that used all nugget, and it's long enough ago. I can't remember exactly what was disgusting about it. Uh, I just remember that I swore that I would never brew this beer again, and I tore out the nugget hops that I was growing.
Is Nugget a common hop to use with a porter? I mean, I would have thought porters would be. I mean, you tell me because I'm probably misremembering. Are Nuggets British hops? I thought they were American.
No, they're American.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I
So
mean, I make American beers, and I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Andrew, but I'm not a big fan of British beers.
and that's totally cool.
Yeah.
But so is Nugget then a common hop to use with porters? Because I mean, most porters I've made or look at, they tend to use like the Fuggle, the EKG, and all of those. So was it like the wrong style for the wrong hop?
You know, maybe. This was early on in my brewing career when I had only been brewing for a few years, and again, I didn't even bother looking to see if Nugget was a commonly used hop for a porter. It came to me in a dream, man. So I was following my muse, I thought, and I did it. And who knows if it was because of the Nugget hops, if it was because of some something I did in making the beer.
Hmm.
I don't really know. I just remember I didn't like it. Uh, and I can think of one other that I made really early on when I was brewing in Charlie's The New Complete Joy of Brewing.
Hmm.
He has a recipe for a goat scrotum porter.
Mm.
I mean, I'm sure that anybody who has ever seen that book remembers that recipe due to the name.
Yeah.
But he has this whole list of things that you can add to it. And I didn't really know about what most of them would do, and I especially didn't realize that probably you shouldn't be adding more than one of them. I took this porter and I added a lot of molasses
Yeah.
and spruce tips.
Ooh.
It came out tasting like very bad cough syrup.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was not a good idea. I blame it on Charlie. He shouldn't have given me the idea.
I mean I can see adding molasses to a dark beer like that, but adding spruce tips just yeah.
Again, I'd only been brewing for a year or two. I didn't know. I had a spruce tree in my backyard. Let's give it a go.
Yeah, no, I mean when I started I did a few experiments that I perhaps shouldn't have, like a peppered American wheat, where I really overdid the black pepper, but I drank
Oh
it
yeah.
out of just pure pride. And my wife's like, "You can throw it out." I'm like, "No, it's delicious,"
Oh
and
man.
never made it again.
Yeah. I hear about people. I hear from people who say, "Man, this batch of beer I made is terrible, but I'm going to drink it to teach myself a lesson." It's, you freaking idiot! Life is too short to drink bad beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, pour it out, move on, do
Hmm.
something else.
I
Uh,
mean, it hurts, but
Yeah, it does, but it doesn't hurt nearly as much as forcing yourself to drink something you don't want to drink.
yeah,
I mean, I do that with beers that I brew that I just discover after I brewed them. I don't like them. There's
yeah,
nothing necessarily wrong with them,
hmm
but it's like if I have a keg that's on tap for 4 months and I've only had 3 glasses out of it, that's a sign that that beer doesn't need to be there
yeah.
anymore. I'll call up one of my friends. I have a friend who lives nearby who's a home brewer, and he's very good for taking beer off my hands if I have too much or something. But there's some of it that even he doesn't want.
Yeah, I was gonna say you heard it here. Denny's brewing friend is not that disconcerting when it comes to beer. So
Oh no, Brant, if you're listening to this, I take it back.
well, we will definitely add the Nick Danger to the tap list and not the spruce tip molasses porter.
No, not no goat scrotum, please. If you have Charlie's book and you're tempted to brew it straight. Please.
Yes.
It was probably a pretty decent porter before I put all that other crap in.
And I mean, I always tout that whenever there's someone new to brewing, they're like, "Oh, what should I read?" That is the one book I recommend over all others.
It's a great book for the attitude.
Yes.
It's a little bit light on best brewing practices and stuff. Although there are a lot of us who got started with that book.
hmm
I think these days I would recommend How to Brew as the first book in terms of the brewing science and procedures, but at the same time recommend Charlie's book to kind of temper that and give the other side of things,
Yeah.
because Charlie's book gets across how easy and fun it is to make beer.
Completely. And I mean, because one of my favorite book of his is actually the Microbrewed Adventures, his travel log about beer.
Oh, I have not read that one yet.
It is such an easy read. Like you can tear through it in like 2 sittings.
Oh, wow.
But again, it's that attitude of going around Europe and the world and trying these different beers. And then at the back of the book, he's got all these clone recipes of beers that he's described throughout it. And it's a great read.
Wow, I'll have to check that out for sure.
Some of it's a little outdated now because he keeps referring to 7% beers as a whopping 7%, and we're now at the point where that's average. So
Right, I know. It's amazing, isn't it? I've been trying to trend my beers to be a little bit lower alcohol as I get older, but I have a hard time keeping the flavor, right? Fewer ingredients means less flavor, that
Yep.
no matter how you do it. So what I'm really trying to do then is, maybe stick with the stronger beers and force myself to drink less of it. And that's a real big thing these days.
Yeah, I was gonna say British beers have a lot of flavor and low alcohol, but
Yeah. Well, I know that, man. There's a lot of good beers, a lot of good low alcohol beers
yeah,
out there. If you look for them. I spent several years coming up with a recipe for an American mild.
yeah,
And it actually turned out really well. It turned out the key to that was to use a really good craft malt, so you got the maximum flavor for the minimum amount of ingredients. And it turned out really well, but I've also found that since I came up with the final version of that recipe, I haven't brewed it again. I don't know what's with that.
So, as we sit here in the mystical homebrew pub that changes to the visiting brewer's desires of what they want from a brew pub, what would be the brew pub you would open, and what would it be called?
It would be called It's Only Freaking Beer. Because that is something that homebrewers and beer drinkers need to get through their head.
Mm-hmm.
It's for enjoyment. It's for sharing with friends. It's not for taking seriously and arguing about, as happens all too often.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've been thinking about this all week, and my pub would be called It's Only Freaking Beer. There would be no hazies, no pastry stouts. You know, it would be straight ahead normal beer.
Fair enough. And what would like the look and feel of it be, doing away with all those crazy beers?
Look and feel comfy, a lot of wood, uh, tables with comfy chairs, maybe some couches with low tables. Uh, Probably no TVs
Hmm.
because I'm not a sports fan by any stretch of the imagination, except for maybe the World Series.
Yep.
Uh, so, I would want it to be a place where you could come and relax and be comfortable, delicious snacks, and, a place to come and hang out with your friends and relax and take it easy.
Nice. Well, everyone, come and join us at the It's Only Freaking Beer Brew Pub. In
That's right.
parentheses, no Facebook groups, and and get a pint of Nick Danger.
Yeah, that's really it, man. I'll make that the recipe that I'll send you because it isn't as publicized as some of the other ones that I've done, and it's
Hmm.
a great beer that I would like people to try out.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So yeah, so go to the show notes. The recipe for Nick Danger is in there. So feel free to brew and drink along.
That's right, man. I'll be having a pint too if it's a cold, rainy day.
Beautiful. Again, totally want to thank Denny Conn for coming on. That was absolutely amazing and is always such a treat to be able to talk to him. But yes, please go to the show notes and check out the recipe for the Nick Danger Porter. And of course, thank you so much for listening. If you could leave us a 5-star review wherever it is you get your podcast, that'll just help other people find the show. If you want to reach out to us, possibly come on and share a pint with me, you can reach us at our website, thehomebrewpub.com, or email landlord@thehomebrewpub.com, or on social at the Homebrew Pub on Instagram and Twitter. And if, like me, you hate those annoying ads, well, we've got to keep the lights on here at the Homebrew Pub somehow, so consider joining our Patreon and becoming a Mug Club member. For $3 a month, you'll get access to ad-free versions of the episodes. But until then, grab your favorite pint, put your feet up, relax, don't worry, and have a homebrew. Till next time, cheers.